Welcome to the Advance Your Art podcast, where we talk about the journey from artist to entrepreneur and everything in between. You've worked hard to hone your craft. Now take it to the next level with tips, techniques, strategies, and routines used by successful artists to grow their businesses and careers. Now, let's get started and have some fun with your host, Yuri Cataldo.
Well, hello, Laura. Welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
I am great. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me.
Yeah, you're most welcome. I love the topic of your podcast, so happy to be a guest.
Well, thank you. I'd like to start off by asking, how do you describe yourself and what it is that you do?
That is a very challenging question for me because a lot of it will depend on context. So I will say, because I do a lot of different things, and I think something that's a lot of other creative people can probably relate to is it's like, how do you present yourself when you do many things? So I often lead with the psychic piece just because I'm most known as a psychic, a celebrity psychic, and also as a host because I host several podcasts myself. That said, I also am a singer, I'm a writer, I am an actress and a producer, and so I do a lot of different things. And so I will often just kind of cater, what I'm telling a person based on how it is that I met them. But what's funny is how certain things will just come up regardless. Like the music thing will often come up, and then the psychic piece will come up, kind of whether or not I bring it up.
Okay. Wow. So you definitely keep busy.
Yeah, I do. That said, I think I do things fairly quickly. And one of the reasons is as a psychic, I'm getting a lot of information. So, for example, when I write, including writing music, I'm receiving information through channeling. And so it comes really fast. So, I might write a book in 6 weeks, which is relatively speaking very fast for most people.
Wow. Yeah, that's a tremendous pace. So I'm curious on that part. So is it like, do you write things down like for hours at a time? Does it come in waves? What's your process in that instance when suddenly you are channeling and writing?
So it depends on what it is that I'm writing. So there's one book I've actually written and not released yet, and that book is almost entirely channeled, meaning basically my spirit guides or whoever I was talking with on the other side was telling me what they were wanting to say. So basically I'm just like typing. It's almost like dictation, at which point that's very quick. But most of my other books are a combination of maybe a little bit of that and then some research or writing about myself and my experiences and what I know. So it wouldn't be quite as fast as that, but it's still faster than like a total research project, for example. Okay. When I write music, it often comes very quickly. So I used to make my living as an actress, and I was in a series of shows where we would write, an original song for each production, and the director would ask me often very last minute to compose a song or write a song for that particular production. And it was amazing to me because he would say, like, Laura, can you write a song, in the style of like a cabaret song about a cat for tomorrow? And I'm not even kidding. That's actually an example. And
right.
then
that did sound a little too specific to be made up.
Yeah, right. And then first it would make me nervous because, that's pretty fast to come up with something so specific, but it would totally come to me and I would learn that I had to just kind of record it or write it down or somehow get it on record so that it would stay, because if it's not really mine in a sense, even though I officially wrote it as, the human on record, it was kind of given to me in terms of spirit.
Okay, wonderful. Before we get deep into that, I'm curious, was there something that you learned, growing up from a parent or teacher or mentor that had an impact on the work that you're doing right now?
Oh my gosh, I think there's many people in my life that have been very influential, but I actually had a lot of family members that were, my mother and my grandmother have to come to mind. They both were very creative, both writers as well. And then my mother is a professional musician. So
Okay.
I grew up around music, around writing, and that was always an influence. Although I'm one of the first people that's kind of gone out and started a business and kind of just done it in a totally different way than my family, which is a little bit more traditional.
Okay. So if you could, can you walk me through the journey of, what you went to school for undergrad and then up into your early careers?
Yeah, I've had kind of an interesting adventure. So I always was interested in the arts and creative stuff. I also was interested in political science when I was young. When I learned that I couldn't be president because I was born outside of the United States, I was very upset. And that is not a typical reaction, I'm pretty sure,
Right.
if someone were to go through the same thing. So I always had that interest in political science, but also was very interested in creative stuff. I did acting, I did singing, I did some writing, and I was a big reader. I loved reading. And so growing up, I did all of those things, and the same thing in high school. And when I got to college, I majored in theater. And I focused on both acting as well as costume design because I love to design and I love clothing and outfits that, are just not kind of everyday. And theater gives you a great opportunity to have some fantastical kind of options. So I did both of those things. But then when I graduated, even though I had some job offers in theater, I was just not really thrilled with the money situation that came with those jobs. And it kind of stopped being fun at that point for me. And so I did kind of transition to more traditional work. I got my master's degree in political science. I worked in higher education, primarily at the University of Colorado, also at University of Washington, working in communications, outreach, and event planning. So, it's a kind of an unusual journey that I've gone on. And then basically at one point I was just in a place in my life where everything just wasn't working. I was physically sick. I was in a bad relationship. I was unemployed because this was during the recession, the start of the recession. And I was in a contract position that ended and nobody was hiring. And I just did a total 180 and kind of went back to my roots in a lot of different ways.
Okay. So around that same time, and I remember the recession very well because that's I actually was working in theater at that time.
Oh man, yeah,
And,
that's a tough one.
Yeah. So yeah, you're right. The pay is already not that great, and then suddenly I was in New York, and all of the jobs dried up. Even the Broadway jobs I was working on all went away because there was no money going into the system.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So when you decided to launch your business as a psychic medium, I'm curious on kind of the process that you took to go into that line of work, and then just like the actual business structure yourself, because you said you have a background in theater and then poli-sci. I don't know if was there some kind of marketing or business training that you had before you decided to launch your own entrepreneurship adventure?
I wouldn't say that I had business training, but I had a lot of experience with marketing in a totally different context, but I still was able to use those tools like how to create a newsletter and, writing copy and things like that, which I think really served me. And also the aspect of theater and acting served me in ways that probably a lot of people wouldn't think. Like, I'm comfortable getting up and talking in front of people. I have a lot of experience both. And I also, in my previous work at universities, did a lot of presentations and public speaking. So I think that helped too. So, but I really went into this in a way with a lot of resistance and kind of kicking and screaming, not quite that dramatically, but my self-concept really didn't include of myself as a psychic. So it took a while for me to kind of come to terms with it. I describe it as coming out of the closet psychically, to like own it and just be forthright with it. And it's a challenging thing for a lot of people that have these abilities to tell people what they experience, because it does evoke for many people a lot of fear, and there's just a lot of misinformation out there about what that means as well. So it was a process. That said, once I worked through the fear and started really putting it out there, it was amazing to me how embraced I was as a whole, and that more than anything, people were just really curious about it, rather than, fearful or, against it or judgmental or whatever.
Oh, sure. Sure. And then, as you grew your business, were there books you were reading or mentors you reach out to that helped you, get featured and really become more of a household name?
Yeah, so there were certainly, I've always been an advocate of getting education and learning. So I'm a big reader. I read a ton. On the business side, I took, courses from different coaches. But I honestly think that the biggest thing that helped me was angels. And I know that sounds funny to people who aren't connected with that aspect, but I wrote a book that's all about how angels talk with us and how we can communicate and ask for things. Oh. And I'll give you an example. I mean, I was very early on, had only just recently started doing readings for people I didn't know, meaning publicly, and got the information psychically to do readings at a local coffee shop. And I really didn't want to do it. I kind of didn't want to do it in public, and I didn't really want to just kind of do that. And so I resisted it for a while, but I finally was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And I just put up a little flyer in the window. And the first day that I was going to do it, so 2 days later, the managing editor of the local paper called me and asked if he could write a story about me.
Oh, wow.
So, this is an example of I'd asked the angels for help with getting the word out and marketing, and I didn't do anything that you quote unquote are supposed to do to get press. I didn't write a press release. I didn't send it to anybody. I didn't 2 days before. And this is very typical of angelic activity. It's right before. Things happen very fast with angels when they're helping out. And so it was very fast that all of a sudden, I put it up, he called me, and then a few days later, the story with a full page color photo of me was in the county paper for Boulder area in Colorado, and that got me a ton of business. And also, anytime you have media, it gives you some kind of credibility, I think. So it helped me not just in terms of visibility, but also people recognizing what I was doing and understanding.
Yeah. Definitely, that's great.
Yeah. So if you're listening to this, I do encourage you to ask angels for help, and it's not complicated. You can just literally think it to yourself, angels, please help me. If you can be specific, that helps even more, but even just kind of giving them permission can do wonders.
Oh, that's great. I had not heard of that before, but that sounds fantastic, actually. I mean, any help, I think, is a fantastic thing.
Right, exactly. I always tell people, look, even if you're skeptical, it can't hurt. What's the worst thing that can happen? Worst thing that can happen is it doesn't happen if you've lost, a few seconds of your time.
Exactly. So I read that as your business was growing, then you also branched out and started a coaching business and started writing. So how did you integrate the coaching business and writing into what you were currently working on?
Yeah, so the writing piece happened because it's so funny. I had booked a talk at a local library, and I was like, wow, I feel like I need something to share because I didn't have anything at that point. And I literally just was like, well, I better write a book. And so that's what I did in about 6 weeks. And for anyone who's, feels like they might like to write, I really encourage it. I think it's wonderful. And just go for it. The first thing I did have it edited, but it was literally spiral bound at a print shop. It was definitely not professional, but you know what? The content was accurate, and it was something I had created. And then after that, which was my big push to get it for that event, I got it more professionally bound and, did the whole, submitted for copyright registration and ISBNs and all that. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that writing, and specifically writing a book versus writing a blog post did, was, again, it establishes legitimacy. It really puts you out there and it differentiates you, because hardly anybody writes a book. But if you have written a book, then all of a sudden people are like, oh, they wrote a book. And then they also have an opportunity to learn about you. So I've heard it described as having a, book as a business card. And I think that's a really great way to think about it. I get a lot of clients that have read my books and then they book with me because it's a really great introduction to me and what I do. So that started, and then even the writing of the books, and then just having fairly fast success as a psychic led me to the coaching piece, because I started to just have all these people ask me for guidance, for coffee, for